Dear listeners, I have so much to tell you, and I often don't know where to start. It seems the world doesn't want to admit that sometimes we make mistakes and that sometimes the wrong person gets punished for something they didn't do. Not all of us have been personally affected, but many of us have been impacted by this reality. And I feel like it's my responsibility to share these stories with you and to tell you what I've learned about wrongful convictions. Welcome to my first conversation on Wrongfully Yours. To say this moment is surreal is probably an understatement. I spent a lot of time thinking about how I wanted this podcast to look and what I hoped it would accomplish. But beyond that, one of the biggest questions I wrestled with was who was going to be my first guest. And I felt like there were so many people I could call on. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt that the perfect person to kick things off with me was one of my closest friends, Canadian exoneree Jamie Nelson. So I first met Jamie in 2009 when I invited him to speak at an event I was hosting. And at that time, I didn't know much about his case, and we had never even met. But a lot of students around campus had heard him speak, and they all told me how deeply his story had impacted them, how sincere and moving his talk was. And so I invited him. And little did either of us know that that day would mark the beginning of a lifelong friendship. Since then, we've seen each other through some of life's biggest moments. And even though we live on opposite ends of the province, we're in touch every few days. Honestly, aside from my husband, Jamie is the person I turn to most for advice, for perspective, for support, for pretty much everything. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of him or feel grateful for his friendship. So without getting too far ahead in the story, I can tell you this. Despite the incredible hardships he endured, Jamie carries a kind of empathy, calm, and quiet wisdom that's hard to describe, let alone to find. He's endured profound injustice, and yet he continues to show up in the world with strength, compassion, and clarity. And so today's conversation is not only about systemic failures, the human cost, and the long road to freedom, but it's also a conversation about friendship, resilience, and support. So, welcome, Jamie, and thank you so much for joining me. As always, you are my rock and always there when I need you most. And I couldn't ever think of a better guest to have for my first episode. So, thank you for being here.
Well,
Um,
thank you very much for the invitation.
and I think we should start with an overview of your case, what happened, and how you got pulled into this crazy world of wrongful convictions.
Well, that is probably the best question anybody can ask me because how do you understand a wrongful conviction unless you can see or have an understanding of the roadmap that took somebody there? For me personally, it began because I desperately wanted to be my son's father. I was in a failed relationship, was in family court pursuing full custody of my son. And as I was having measured steps of success each and every time, uh, I soon I soon learned that I was having significant issues and problems in the criminal justice side of court. My ex-partner's best friend, they worked together in unison, in concert, and they devised the plan that if the best friend was the victim of crimes that I had committed against her, that would derail me in family court. So on three
So
separate,
it's like you're trying to be a good father, you're trying to be there, and this is just coming back to bite you time and time again.
every time that I had success in family court, yeah, that's exactly what happened. It was daunting. It was one of the hardest things that I think I've done, other than go through the nightmare that became my wrongful conviction. But just to try to stand as my son's father and try to demonstrate that, in my opinion and in the court's opinion, that I would be the better parent. But each time that I took those measured steps forward, I just got the rug yanked right out from under me. And it culminated with the third allegation, which was the most serious and the most violent and the most brutal. But Kathy Fordham alleged that at 1:15 or 1:20 in the morning, I caught her off guard at her home, violently beat her, held her hostage in her own home, and then uh, brutally sexually assaulted her.
So so where were you at 1:15 on that night?
I was in Monkland, Ontario, at my home, 45 minutes outside of Ottawa, with my wife at the time, Marie, and my
So
children.
so you did not attack her.
I was in
Did
my bed.
anyone attack her?
No, it actually, great question. It was discovered that it was actually a non-event, that she had lied, made up, and fabricated the entire event.
She had the previous times.
Yes, yes.
So this was a pattern, like an escalating pattern of
Oh,
hers to just
absolutely.
make you the villain.
Absolutely. Kathy realized early on in all of these shenanigans that her as a female victim of domestic abuse and then sexually motivated crimes put her in a very powerful position, because I don't think that our society has any more sacred robes than those of the victim of sexual assault. So once she
True.
was draped in that envelope of comfort and security, and she saw that she was the center of attention, it just fueled her. And she didn't just strike out at me. Ultimately, she struck out at probably dozens of men. Five or six, she alleged that she was sexually assaulted by. Five or six,
Unbelievable.
she alleged that she was brutally assaulted or kidnapped. And she was ultimately discovered to be probably Ottawa's most prolific serial liar within the criminal justice system.
So let's just back up. So she's alleging that you attacked her in the middle of the night, and presumably the authorities believed her. So then what happened?
Oh, they wholeheartedly believed her. She waited 2 months, however, between the time that she alleged the event occurred and the time that she went to the police. And I think it's really critical when you look at it under a microscope, because the weekend that she went to the police to report that I had violently raped her was the first weekend that I had my son Dustin, after reestablishing contact with the family court after the second set of charges had been dealt with and the custody portion of it. I then reestablished all the contact with family court, got Dustin back, got visitation, and on the very weekend that I was having the weekend with Dustin was the weekend that she now all of a sudden went to the police and said, "Oh yeah, 2 months ago, this is what happened." She walked in with a
And
5-page pre-written statement, started and stopped, written in 4 pens. So
and
several times.
presumably because this is 2 months after the alleged attack, there's no physical forensic evidence available to support her claim. All she has is her word
All she
versus
had
yours.
was all she had was her word. Yet, however, she did go to the hospital in
Go on.
February because she attended at the Montfort Hospital in Ottawa, stating that her ex-boyfriend had beat her up 4 days ago. She was ambulatory. She was in no distress. She had absolutely no injuries. Her abdomen was clear, no bruises, other than a very, very small, smaller than a dime, yellow to green bruise on one wrist, and then a very similar small bruise on one of her mandibles. Outside of that, nothing, not a single injury. She left in good spirits. She refused the pamphlets for domestic violence support. She walked out the door. 2 months later, I'm having to visit with Dustin. And then boom went the dynamite. I pull into my driveway after going on a road trip to get ice cream with my two sons. And before the van was in park, the driver's door was open and I had a service weapon pressed to the left side of my head. That's
This
how
is
it
how you
started.
found out that she had gone with this fabricated story.
Yep. Uh, that's exactly how I found out. A driver's door getting pulled open, gun to my head. And the
Unbelievable.
OPP officer said, "If you run, I will shoot you in the effing back." And by the time I pulled in and by the time this was happening, my wife Marie and my daughter Christina, who was 5 at the time, were standing at the open door watching my life fall apart. Not only my life, their lives.
So Christina is at the door and your son is in the back seat.
Matthew and Dustin were in the back seat.
So you had two children in the back seat.
Yep, two in the van, still in car seats, and Christina and Marie were open the door as soon as the cops approached me. That's when Marie opened the door.
So three of your children witnessed this incident.
Yeah, two of them were very young, but Christina was 5.
Sure, but it doesn't negate the fact that this was being played out in front of your children.
Right in front of them. And
Unbelievable.
I don't know if at the time the OPP constable knew in that
Mm,
moment that I had two children behind me,
right,
because they just approached at such rapid speed that they probably, oh, we got the bad guy, let's get him. Me,
right.
no pre-thought of who might have been in the vehicle with me.
So they have you at gunpoint. Presumably, they take you down to the station. And is this when you find out what happened?
No, these were OPP officers that were effecting an arrest warrant on behalf of the Ottawa Police Department.
Okay.
They were in well, the car that took me away didn't even have a cage. And I had recently undergone skin graft surgery on my arms for, I think, the second or third set of surgeries. So as they were getting ready to put me in the car, I pleaded with them, please don't handcuff me, like, because it'll rip and tear the grafts off my arms. So they saw how new and fresh and pink they were, so they agreed not to handcuff me. So I just sat in the back of that car, the two cops in front of me, and at one point I leaned forward because I saw the one police officer put my warrant, the arrest warrant, down. So I wanted to take a look at it, but he put it face down on the seat. But what I could see on the back sheet of it was, and it was a facsimile, because back then that's,
Hmm.
the quickest way to communicate. But it said, do me a favor and please pick up this piece of shit. Thanks, Bob Kerr. And Bob Kerr
Wow.
was the lead investigator in my case. So I looked at it and I said, oh, so I'm a piece of shit. And the cop in the passenger seat grabbed up the warrant and he tucked it inside his vest and he goes, no, no, that's just a cop term. That's just a cop term. And I said, well, I'm just a cook and piece of shit is a piece of shit.
Yes.
So
So
no, they took me to long.
obviously, they're approaching you with a preset uh, m- version of you in their mind.
Oh,
Like they're
absolutely.
coming at you with a preset constructed notion.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I was conveyed to Long Sault, Ontario, so that the Ottawa detectives could come and pick me up. And when we got to Long Sault, as soon as I got into the detachment, I recognized a gentleman that I had worked with in the hospitality industry, a guy by the name of Brian Samuel, but now he was a constable. And he just looked at me and he had this incredible look of just disdain on his face and anger. And he goes, Jamie, what the happened to you? And I said, Brian. And I went to put my hand out to shake his hand. And he recoiled into the corner like a 5-year-old, terrified. And he wanted nothing to do with me. And he goes, get a lawyer, get a good lawyer. And then he walked out of the room. A few minutes later,
Wow.
the two Ottawa detectives showed up. I went through the same rigmarole. You can't cuff me. They had no interest in interviewing me. They had no questions for me. I asked them if they would give me the opportunity to do a polygraph, and they said, why would I? Like, I believe the young lady. And that was that. Now, in my mind, now I didn't know this until I had gone through the process, but in the late 80s, 88 or 89, corroboration was removed from the criminal code. So now Kathy didn't need an independent witness to have heard it or seen the alleged event. And then in 1991, because of a abhorrent murder downtown Ottawa, um, a retired deputy commissioner of the RCMP's, his daughter was murdered. And almost overnight, zero tolerance policies went into effect across Canada throughout every attorney general's office when it came to domestic violence or sexually motivated crimes. Zero tolerance. You automatically charge. So these two police officers walked into that interview room in long suit, knowing that all they had to do was pick me up and take me back and book me. They didn't have to do their job. It wasn't like, okay, where were you? What were you doing? Just the facts. And then it's not like a scene from Law and Order where, commercial, and then the detectives come back in and go, oh, his alibi checked out, and then they got to let me go. I was denied all of that because the system, through legislation and through directive from government, handcuffed me and put me behind the eight ball. I was now presumed guilty. And
So
as is,
you had an uphill battle from the start. From the moment that she made her accusation, it was just a complete uphill battle for you.
I didn't know then, but it was the steepest uphill mountain that I've ever in my mind could imagine or picture. No steps, no handrails, no guide wires, just sheer cliffs. And I had a really good idea of how bad it was going to get the very first night that I was sent to the Ottawa Carlton Detention Center. I was I went through intake, not like every other guy, not like the guy that robbed the bank or murdered somebody or stole a little old lady's purse. I was strip searched 3 times.
Wow.
I was presented baby dolls, which are suicide garments. I had no shoes. I had no undergarments. I had just a very heavy woven blanket that was rip proof, tear proof, fireproof. I had no bedding. I had no pillow. I was
Unbelievable.
led to a cell behind the hole,
So
segregation behind the hole, and
at
they
this
pushed.
time, do you know what you're charged with?
Yep,
Okay, I'm trying to get inside your head and figure out what you're thinking. What can you possibly be thinking at this time?
I'm thinking that everybody that is coming into contact with me is perceiving me to be just a true monster, comparable to the likes of Paul Bernardo, Clifford Olson, but
And I
not
mean,
at the time, but
anybody who knows you would obviously say that is the furthest thing from the truth. And so you have this vision that this is what is being assumed of you. W- Like, what's going through your mind? Like, how do you plan on going forward? Do you just go like, "Oh man, I'm sunk now," or is it I'm going to scream from the rooftops, or I need to find a way out of this, or what's going on? How do you deal with that?
well, that night in those baby dolls with no shoes and no bedding, they led me to a cell behind the disassociation unit, the hole, to a separate set of cells. And they cracked open the door and they just pushed me in, and it was pitch dark. There was a very, very dull, maybe 5 watt yellow count light in the one corner. And it was so dark when they pushed me in there that I had to use my hand and just walk around the wall. And
Wow.
I realized that the only thing that I was coming across as I was walking this rectangle was I was bumping into the toilet, the stainless steel sink and toilet. There was no bed, there was no desk, there was no bed, no mattress.
Mm.
Like I literally slept on the floor like an animal. I
Yeah.
had to request toilet paper when I needed it. I had to request the water be turned on. I remember one day, not even knowing if it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 in the morning, 7 at night, starving, just starving. And I remember peering through the cracks of my cell door and I could see 5 of my meal trays sitting on the floor. So that's a day and a half that they hadn't fed me.
Unbelievable.
The food was delivered, but they didn't give it to me. And
Wow.
that went on for 21 days until I was arraigned and denied bail. So I didn't even know where I was, what day it was, if it was day, night. I think I had 2 showers in 21 days. I was never given access to the yard. And the only time I could see or speak with Ken Hall was if he was in the institution seeing other inmates and we could coordinate a visit. I was denied access to the telephone.
And Ken was your lawyer?
Ken Hall was my lawyer for all three
Right.
cases.
Okay. And so you're brought to trial.
brought to trial, pled not guilty, chose judge alone, thinking it'd most likely be easier to convince one person that I've been subjected to a fabricated event than 12. So I went
Right.
judge alone. Trial was protracted over, once it got started, several weeks because we had to take several breaks due to summer holidays. But ultimately, at the end of the day, after 9 days of trial, I was convicted. And I never
And
thought
sen
that it would be.
and based solely on the word of Kathy Fordham.
Based solely on her word. She testified that I bit both breasts so severely that it left permanent crescent-shaped bite marks. She said that I punched her in the face 5 or 6 times to the point that she saw stars. She said that her eyes were swollen shut. She said that her lips were split, that on the ground while I was raping her, I was kneeing her in the abdomen and kicking her to make her comply. But yet, when she was at the hospital after, she says that this happened. She's ambulatory. She's in no distress. There's no injuries. Her abdomen was clear. There were no crescent-shaped bite marks on her breast. The emergency doctor, Dr. Viola, testified all to that. So did 2 triage nurses. So even in the absence of corroborative medical evidence, the judge believed her over me. He discounted my alibi because he said the strongest prong of my alibi was that I was with my wife, and whose wife wouldn't lie for her husband?
And sure. Yeah, of course. I mean,
So
a
there it went,
typical.
and convicted.
And so then you were sentenced to 3.5 years?
3.5 years plus the pre-sentence time that I had done.
Yep.
It was a big chunk of time. Now, I know several other wrongly convicted people that have served decades. I know one gentleman that served 3.
Yes. Yep. And, we can be thankful for, celebrate the small victories that you did not spend 3 decades. But
No,
I
thank
imagine
God.
that the transition coming home wasn't any easier for you than it is for any other wrongfully convicted individual. And I'm noticing that we're just at about time. So I'm hoping, because I know there is still so much more of your story to tell, I'm hoping that you will join me again next time so we can discuss your exoneration and coming home and, where you're at now.
Absolutely, that would be my privilege and a treat to be able to share it with you and everybody that's going to be listening. And yeah, you got to know how I got out of this.
So thank you so much for listening to this first episode of Wrongfully Yours. Jamie's story is a devastating example of how easily someone's life can be dismantled by a false accusation, and how the system, once in motion, is often more invested in securing a conviction than in finding the truth. From flawed investigations to overlooked evidence, Jamie's experience exposes the systemic failures that continue to put innocent lives at risk. Today's conversation wasn't just about what Jamie survived. It's about what we need to change. Let's not forget that Jamie spent years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. But that's not where his story ends. Next time, we'll talk about what happened after his conviction, his exoneration, his return home, and what it means to rebuild after surviving the unimaginable. If you were touched by this episode, please consider sharing it with others, liking and reviewing us, and following the podcast on your favorite platform so you don't miss what comes next. As always, thank you for listening to Wrongfully Yours, where we believe that telling these stories is the first step toward preventing the next injustice. And until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and keep fighting for justice. And while today's letter may have piqued your interest, this is only part of the story. There's still so much more to tell. The effects of wrongful convictions are far reaching. They touch us all. I'll write to you again soon as I continue my conversations with those whose lives have been impacted by a wrongful conviction. But until then, I remain wrongfully yours. If you have something that you want to talk about with me, or even if you want to just send me some words of encouragement, you can drop me a line at wrongfullyyourspodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out my website, kellylauzon.ca, for more information about me and the kinds of things that I do.